What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 36th episode of the PlayStation Drive. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Turford. I'm joined, as always, by the man himself, Matt Sawinski. Matt, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Thursday where apparently it's once again super cold again here in Canada?
I don't know what's going on anymore, Ryan. This weather is ridiculousness. I hate it. I don't like winter. I'm done with the cold, Ryan. I would like the warm to get here, but this isn't the weather cast. But how you doing, my friend? How's everything?
Can't complain. We aren't going to have like an entire show dedicated to one topic this week. We have lots of stuff to talk about, so it should be a fun show. So let's just dive right into it. So, of course, folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Of course, number one, subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're all the places you find podcasts. So check us out there. Also, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a little rating, maybe even a review, because that goes to help the show a long way. Also, if you want to see our beautiful faces every single week, head over to YouTube, youtube.com/YumiCapri. We put up a video version of the show every single Friday morning. And of course, like, subscribe, share with all your friends, all that good stuff. Throw on notifications, ring that bell. If I had a little bell here, I'd, ring the bell. And then last but not least, if you want this show early as well, heading over to Patreon, patreon.com/YumiCapri. Throw a little tip in the tip jar and out comes content. All right. Without further ado, Matt, let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It's time for the playlist and let's get this show on the road. What did you play this week, my friend?
So we have one thing in common. So I'll start with the thing that we don't have in common. I played a PSVR game called Fracked. It's been on my radar for quite some time. It's like a very like James Bondy action adventure, shooty stuff. Like the game starts with you like skiing down this mountain as there's like an avalanche coming. It's very action packed. It's very, very cool. Unfortunately, I only played it for about 20 minutes before I got violently motion sick and had to literally tear the thing off tear the headset off of my head. Now, to be fair, I haven't played a VR game like this in quite some time, so my VR legs are a little bit wobbly compared to what they used to be. Mm-hmm. But also, like, the accessibility options when it comes to Fracked aren't as in-depth as I would like them to be. And like it's frustrating because the game itself is really, really cool and I'm going to keep playing it, but it's definitely going to be the thing where like, I need to go out and buy ginger candy again. I need to get the fan going. So I blow it on myself while I'm playing. Like all the little tips and tricks that I was using initially in my PSVR endeavor, I'm going to have to bring them back to be able to play through this because I genuinely really want to. Because like even stuff like The Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners, they give you more room to play with the settings, like, turning down the FOV, putting the grid up around you. And Fracked does have a few options, but not as many as I would have liked to kind of mitigate the motion sickness experience. Because again, the game itself is really, really cool. So I'm definitely going to be going back to it. But yeah, I had one of those things where I was like, I can do it. Nope, never mind. And like I tore my headset off and like collapsed on the floor and sat there for like 5 minutes not moving because VR motion sickness stays for way too long.
Yep.
So that was a thing. And then thanks to you, I didn't even realize that this was happening.
To be fair, they shadow dropped this. Like there was no announcement ahead of time. I didn't even know they were doing a demo for it, but go on.
Well, that's perfect because it was because of you still. I'm thanking you and only you, Ryan, not anybody else. You are the sole reason why this demo exists. I played the Monark demo and this game went from like an insta buy to I'll wait a little bit for it as I played through the demo. And I'll tell you why. The graphics are not great, but like my expectations for graphics when it comes to games like this aren't usually genuinely that high. If I'm having a fun time playing and the story's great, then I'm going to enjoy it. I love Vanitas. He's an awesome little dude. I love him already. And I love his relationship with the protagonist kind of being like, the protagonist doesn't care. He's going to treat him however he wants to treat him. And like they have some really cool transformation sequences and stuff. I loved the beginning where they had like the questionnaire to help this, like a psychological questionnaire to help determine like which like helper you're going to get based on the 7 deadly sins, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's based off the 7 deadly sins and they're like wildly different from each other because I tried a couple experiments and you get like wildly different party members depending on your questionnaire, which is really interesting and cool.
So very quickly, who did you get when you did it like the first time through?
I got lust the first time.
Ooh, all right. And I got gluttony.
Okay.
I'm apparently a glutton. So yeah, I thought that was a really, really cool and a really interesting way to kind of set things up. And like there's like in the menu, there's like a lot more psychological tests that seemingly will pop up later. So I'm really curious to see how they got used. I don't like that we have the classic protagonist dies, the entire thing is over, especially in a game where almost every time that you attack, unless you're doing a back attack, you're automatically getting attacked back.
Yeah. Like the counter percentage is like pretty close to 100% if you're not doing like a back attack, because side attacks, there's like a 50% chance on most attacks. It also doesn't help that he's a melee character, whereas because you had gluttony, because I also did gluttony on one of my kind of tests, because I know it's also a melee character, but you can actually get a ranged character, because that's what Lust is essentially. It's an archer. That I guess unlocks like magic spells with like fireballs and stuff like that. So you're attacking entirely at range, so you really never have to worry about enemies counterattacking you. So I almost wish like the main character could like maybe swap out their attack style and be more of a ranged character, so then you could be more strategic with that. Because again, as you to your point, if they die, it's over. So you never want to rush in with that character. You always want to be very careful with them, which is funny because it always starts with that character when you go into battle before you kind of switch to the other characters, which is interesting.
Yeah, so like it's just like it's one of those like old school tropes that I'm kind of like, it's never game breaking for me, but it's one of those things I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I think the super speed was kind of broken because I accidentally left it on in the battle and it stayed on throughout me running around the areas. It was just on in perpetuity, which I don't have a problem with because I like keeping that stuff on, especially in games like this. I just found it really funny. Anime cutscenes were awesome, gave me like really some really Mob Psycho vibes. Hitotsubashi sucks. I don't like it. I don't like him. He's already annoying, and I kind of wish that some of like the dialogue options that you have with like Vanitas, like you have an option to make your protagonist very like snarky, and I kind of wish that carried over into some of the kind of general NPC and like villain interactions. But like overall, I enjoyed it the more I played it. I know some of the things that will irk me are the load times. And like I said, this is like a very spoiled, privileged position playing as we have been on PS5. The fact that there is a load through every door, through every section, and like to get to new areas, because like, sometimes you have fast travel unlocked, but a lot of the times because of like the story stuff, you're stuck running through the entire area over and over again to the next thing. So like, while I'm still looking forward to it, and I'm still like, I think I will ultimately enjoy it. The demo was kind of like an experience where I was like, okay, the battles are really cool. This world is interesting. The mood is really cool. But like, I don't know as much anymore, Ryan. But what am I off base here? How did you feel about the demo? What were your thoughts on it?
No, you're not off base. In fact, actually, I think that you and I had like different things that kind of annoyed us about it. Because first of all, the loading things, it's just one of those things where because this is a cross-gen game and it's a Switch game, like I think they just built the load times into it, like kind of like how some of the backwards compatible games play on Xbox Series X as well, where essentially like, yes, even though the console loads it fast, like doesn't need to load, they had to build it in there for the other consoles. So, and as a concession. So I understand why it's there. And I think I'm more used to that because I played the Caligula Effect 2 recently. I think I talked about that last year. And that game also is from like the same publisher as well. And also had the same issue with that too. So I was used to it from playing that game. So it didn't really bother me that much, but I can definitely see like if you're used to only playing like PlayStation 5 games recently, like I can imagine that kind of, being like on a sour note. One of the things I didn't really love about the demo so much was exploring some of the areas in the mist, which is kind of the areas you go to kind of kill all the enemies. And you're basically trying to liberate these areas. And you basically start in this big school, and the school is covered in mist on different floors. And you have to go to each floor to kind of like, defeat like a boss enemy and then kind of dispel the mist. But one of the things that I didn't like about it, in regards to that, was each floor had like a specific puzzle that you had to try and solve that usually involved quite a bit of investigating. And normally I wouldn't mind that type of thing, but the way that they do it in this game, I found it to be more confusing sometimes than a lot of other games that do this type of thing. For example, there's this one floor where essentially you have to find a locker combination to basically proceed. But like, and there's like journal entries and stuff kind of spread throughout the floor and people you have to talk to. And I was basically running around for an hour trying to find where this dang combination was. And I couldn't find it anywhere. So it was just like, I think that the puzzle setup is not super intuitive. So I feel like later in the game, maybe when some of the puzzles get harder, that's more my worry, where I'm like, maybe I'm going to be running around, like spending more time just running around looking for stuff than I would be hopeful. But one of the things I like about the battle system in this game in particular, that's a highlight for me, is I like that there's no random battles this time around, or there's even no enemies on the map. Essentially, the way the battles work in this game is like, you grind as much as you want to grind, where essentially you have a cell phone, you call a cell phone number that then brings you into this alternate world where you fight enemies, and you can continue. And it basically, like, as you finish a battle, it's like, do you want to keep going? Do you want to do another randomized battle? And you just keep doing it over and over again for as many times as you feel you need to kind of grind up your characters. Because essentially you're earning skill points, and as you allot skill points into your characters, it basically increases their levels. And I really like that stuff. I kind of like the leveling system in this game, and I like the combat overall. Besides the stuff you talked about, the counters and the way that your main character is a little bit weak at the beginning. But I found, like, towards the end of the demo, my main character in particular, like, I just funneled more of the points into him than the other characters, because I knew like he was the vulnerable point of the team. So as long as I kept him pretty high leveled, like, I never really had anything to worry about. But I can see your point about, like, the early stages in the game, where essentially he's like very weak to start with. So you have to be a little bit careful with him. You have to babysit him a little bit. But I like kind of the strategic combat, like the strategic nature of the combat, where it almost feels like a strategy role-playing game, where essentially, like, if you crowd your allies around an enemy, they can all attack them, like, every time one of your characters does an attack. And likewise, it works the same for the enemies. But go ahead and see what you're going to say, Matt.
Yeah, no, I actually had a question, because this is something that I'm a little bit undecided on before we kind of move off of the leveling and the combat. How do you feel about the leveling, like, your experience points essentially being tied, not only being shared across the characters, but it's also the same currency that you basically use with Vanitas to be able to, like, create items and stuff when you're kind of out in the dungeons? Because, like, for me, I think it's cool because it brings almost like a resource management aspect to it, where you have to be really careful about where you're spending your points, and, like, do I save some in case I need health stuff later on? Because I can imagine as the game continues, there's going to be some pretty grueling fights in there. But at the same time, I almost wish that the, like, Vanitas had, like, a separate pool of currency or something that you could use. But, like, I don't know, where are you at on that one?
So the way I felt about this is I really did never feel, in the demo anyways, maybe this is different for the full game, but in the demo, I never used an item the entire time because of the way my characters leveled. Like, 2 of my 3 characters had healing skills, so I would just use those rather than items. And likewise, with status effects, you have the ability to kind of negate that, because status effects in the demo didn't really come up all that often either, I found. So the way you negate them, I didn't really felt like I had to rely on items. So while in the demo, I felt like that was okay. I can imagine, to your point, like, if the fights get harder in the main game, I could imagine that putting a strain on the resources. But I also like the challenge there that's presented to you, where essentially you do have to really think about it and not, like, overcommit all your points all at once, because you might need them later for something else. Like, I like that aspect of it, where it is like, where it feels really strategic, and you're not just, running in there, getting all of, like, just over leveling your characters and then going about your day. I like that aspect to it. So yeah, I imagine it's going to be quite challenging in the main game as far as some of the later levels, but in the demo, I just rolled with what I had. But again, I think that was just the luck of, having Lust as one of my party members, which was, again, a ranged magic user in addition to being kind of an archer. So I had, like, a lot more utility spells than I normally would have had probably in your situation with Glutton and that. So I think that definitely played into it a little bit. And I also, they didn't touch too much on this in the demo either, but there's also the ability to, once you kind of, like, level up your other stats for your main character, as far as, like, your other 7 deadly sins, essentially, you can recruit other party members in the same way. So I'm interested to see how that mixing and matching is going to work too.
Yeah, I think I'm really, really curious, and I'm happy the demo is as long as it is, because I really do feel like by the end of the demo, I was much more sold than I think in the opening bits, but especially because the opening feels very frantic. Like, you're just kind of really thrown into a situation, and there's kind of not a lot of explaining going on until you kind of, have a massive exposition dump. So I was much more sold on it by the end. And even stuff like the load times, I think I'll get used to. It's just kind of like, when it's in your face, I'm kind of like, But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious for the main game now, but I think my hype has dropped a little bit based on the demo, especially given when it's coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's coming out in a crowded month. And it's just one of those things where I think like ultimately what I'm projecting this game's like kind of overall feel is going to be when we finally get the full copy is going to be, it's going to probably be a really fun but flawed experience. And I think a good story is really going to go a long way. So depending on how the story kind of unfolds for the rest of the experience, I think it's really going to swing things one way or the other as far as how we feel about it. So I'm excited to talk about Monark again. This will not be the last time we talk about Monark in the next month. So wink, wink. This will be a thing that we talk about more, so keep that in mind. But I am excited to talk about it more. But yeah, with a busy February, it might be one of those things where the recommendation might end up being kind of to wait on it because it is a lower budget RPG. Let's just throw it out there. Like it's not a AAA game or anything like that, and we shouldn't come in with that expectation. I don't think.
Yep.
So there you go. All right. The other game I played this week, of course, is the game I've been talking about for a while, but I finally finished it. Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria on PlayStation 2. I really enjoyed that game. I thought it was super fun. Again, I've been talking about it in the show for a while now, where it's essentially like a Metroidvania mixed with an RPG, and I had a great time with it. So I'm excited to play more because I've actually got Valkyrie Profile Lilith here on the PSP that I'm actually moving on to next. This is actually like a remake of the original game. So I'm actually excited to be checking that out kind of over the next couple weeks. Because again, I'm going to be doing like an RPG Cave episode in the future about Valkyrie Profile. So I'm kind of catching up with the series, and I really love Valkyrie Profile too. So I'm hoping that Lilith on the PSP is super fun as well. So there you go. Plus, it's a good way of playing the original game, because the original game, if you want to buy it now on PlayStation 1, it's like $500 for a complete.
Of course
copy.
it is.
So there you go. All right, let's slam the brakes on this conversation. It's time for some breaking news. It's been a slower news week, but I feel like we've got some good topics to talk about this week. Starting off with February's PlayStation Plus games. Matt, please be excited. EA's UFC 4 on PlayStation 4, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, a Wonderlands one-shot adventure. Even though there's a PlayStation 5 upgrade for this one, it's PlayStation 4 only for this one. And then, of course, Planet Coaster Console Edition, which is out on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, but you only get the PlayStation 5 version if you redeem it. So, Matt, actually, before I go to you, I'm going to bring in FamousSeumas over on Discord, who asked the question, what is the best game for February's PlayStation Plus games? So Matt, first of all, what do you think about this? And because I was you shaking your head. And also, what do you think the best game is here?
After the highs of January, they had to bring in February, knowing that we're not going to have any time to play any of the PlayStation Plus games anyway, because of Horizon and Gran Turismo imminent and Elden Ring. They were like, you know what? Let's throw some crap out there. I think this sucks. I think this is one of the worst months we've had in quite some time. UFC is not personally for me at all, which, like, to the people who do enjoy those games, cool. Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, a Wonderlands one-shot adventure, is almost as egregious as Godfall, in my opinion, given how it's DLC for a game that came out, like 13 years ago. And we've already had the Borderlands, collection, which had this included. While I understand that this version has a little bit more added to it, this is ridiculous. And obviously only because Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is coming out in March. I hate this almost as much as I hated Godfall. And Planet Coaster Console Edition, I will be nice here. And to answer FamousSeumas' question, I think this is legitimately the best game on here. I've seen a lot of people on Reddit and online genuinely happy that this is coming. While again, it's not a game for me. I'm not usually about these kinds of management sims. I have heard good things, and people seem to really enjoy this game. So for me, I think this is the best one. And, I think that for people who are excited about this kind of game, I'm happy that they're getting it. It sucks that it's not cross, PS4, PS5, and that you only get the PS5 version. But this is the state of PlayStation Plus, with Spartacus obviously imminent. So that's why they're kind of like, here, whatever, take this. I think this month is not great. I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, it's kind of a month. And I'm with you. I don't really care about UFC, but I think if you like UFC, number one, you probably already own UFC 4, but it's probably a good game for you. And yeah, I don't love the inclusion of Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep, because that's like an $8 game that's essentially just, again, it's not even really a full game. It's just a piece of a DLC that came out from a PlayStation 3 game, Matt. Because you have to remember, Borderlands 2 came out on PlayStation 3, not even PlayStation 4. So it's like, that's how long ago that DLC was essentially. But so yeah, you're right. Planet Coaster is probably the best game of the mix. Although again, if you're a UFC fan, probably you'd argue that UFC is probably a better game. But overall, a weaker month. But they can't all be winners, Matt, as far as PlayStation Plus is concerned. But I will give PlayStation the benefit of the doubt here, because Xbox just announced Games with Gold this morning, and this is way better than Games with Gold this month. So
really,
yeah, Games with Gold is real bad. I mean, when your best game on Games with Gold is Hydrophobia, there's something wrong. So there you go.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're gonna have to get rid of that sooner or later and just focus on Game Pass. I feel like really they're just kind of shoveling whatever they can get
Game Pass this month in particular is like shot through the moon is like incredible this month. So there you go. So that's what we think about PlayStation Plus. Overall, a down month, but again, they can't all be winners. And I'm expecting like either March or April to probably kind of get back to form. And we'll hopefully hear about PlayStation Now games probably next week. So we'll talk about that next week.
Also, make sure you claim Persona 5 Strikers before it's gone forever. That game is fantastic, and you only have a few days left to claim it. Get it. That game is so good.
For sure. All right, before I get into the next topic, real quick, I wanted to bring in something that we talked about last week, and I'm just surprising Matt with this now because it's not in the document. But did you ever check out your PlayStation Wrapped from last week? I remember we talked about it last week, but mine wasn't working, so I said we'd talk about it this week. But
I have mine right here, ready to go. I pulled it up literally like as we were on the show last week, and then left it sitting on my phone in a tab open for the last week because I didn't want to lose it. And I was waiting to have this conversation with you. So I do have it.
What were your top 3 games, Matt?
My top 3 games were, as I scroll down, Yakuza Like a Dragon, shocker, was my number 1. Tales of Arise was my number 2, and Temtem was my number 3, and then Persona 5 Strikers was my number 4. And I'm just going to say that because it's Persona 5 Strikers and it's great. I think I had a total of 521 hours played this past year. What about you, my friend?
Oh my god! So I've got mine on my phone. So in my number, since you included your number 4 game, I'll include mine, Song of Memories, which is actually a visual novel with multiple endings. I played that apparently for 32 hours, and then Tales of Arise was my next one, 47 hours. And then Persona 5 Royal was my number 2, 98 hours played.
Let's go.
And then number 1, I mean, to the surprise of everyone, Final Fantasy 14, 1,158 hours. For a grand total of 1,589 hours on PlayStation last year.
So you tripled me. I'm obviously a fake gamer and don't deserve to be on this show. I think you doubled my time in Final Fantasy 14 alone.
Hashtag fake gamer.
Hashtag fake gamer. I don't deserve to be here. I'm sorry.
All I'm going to do now is when I intro you, I'm not going to call you the man himself. I'm going to intro you Matt Sawinski, fake gamer.
I'm a shill. I've been paid by PlayStation to be here.
Hold on. And before we move on, I wanted to ask you real quick, because you've also got it in front of you. How many platinums did you get this year, Matt? What kind of fake gamer stats we got going on here?
Dude, I am the worst. I got 1. I got 1. Yeah. Go ahead.
I got 15 this year.
Nicely done. Well, this year, 2022 is going to already be a thing because I popped 2 platinums right at the beginning of the year, and that'll probably be all 2 that I get all year. But look at you, 15. Nicely done.
I mean, there are more visual novels out there to platinum that. So there you go. I'm to throw it out there, with all the hours I played in Final Fantasy 14 this year, I'm not even halfway to the platinum trophy in that game. So
is that a thing you actually want to do? Do you really want to get the platinum that?
I really want to, but it's going to take so long, Matt. Like the platinum trophy for Final Fantasy 14, I estimate takes at least 5,000 hours to get it. And that's dedicated to doing all the things you need for the platinum trophy. So yeah.
All right.
Because essentially you have to do like 10,000 dungeons and raids and stuff. For example, you have to also do I think it's like 5,000 fates. So it's a lot.
That is obscene. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Never mind. Well, good luck with that. Well, I mean, 5,000 hours, you'll get there in about 3 to 4 years at your current pace. So
that's true. There you go. All right. Next topic. And this kind of relates to what we talked about last week with the Activision stuff. I had to bring this in here now. Normally this is the type of thing we wouldn't talk about on the show because it is borderlining on kind of rumor and speculation territory. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about because I wanted to bring in Phil Spencer's tweet anyways to at least talk about that and dissect it. But we also got a report from Jason Schreier over in Bloomberg that I'll talk about as well. So in a recent tweet, Phil Spencer had this to say about Call of Duty's future on PlayStation, quote, "I've confirmed our intent is to honor all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship. However, while some took this to mean that this confirmed that the series would never be leaving PlayStation, a new report from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg states differently that Call of Duty is locked in for 3 more entries beyond what has been released so far. And beyond that, it's really up to Microsoft. So essentially what Jason actually took to on Twitter and kind of tweeted about his thoughts on the idea was that he expects that this year's entry, next year's entry, and then Warzone will be covered under this agreement as far as like the next Warzone, essentially, like when they upgrade Warzone inevitably next year to whatever next year's Call of Duty is. So he imagines 2024 is when we kind of maybe see the changeover. So they can maybe negotiate another agreement from there to keep it on PlayStation. But Matt, we saw lots of people talking about this on the internet, so I had to bring it in here. So I need to know your take on this. First of all, do you think Phil Spencer's tweet means it's sticking around forever? What do you think?
This is brilliantly worded. Like, what an incredible tweet, just because of how little and how much it actually tells us. The desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, using the word desire is a very specific word that they used. Because this really reads to me like we want Call of Duty to be on PlayStation. If it's Game Pass on PlayStation or if it's whatever on PlayStation, we wanted to. PlayStation said no. It's very easy to start pointing fingers in a couple of years once they say like, oh, look, we wanted it. PlayStation said no. So like this for me is a very easy way to spin that. And it's brilliantly written. Brilliantly written. I think this kind of lines up with what I had in mind with, the deal isn't going to close until next June anyway. This year and next year's, I think, is a lock. Warzone, like we have already talked about, I 100% think it'll stay on because it's free to play. They're just making more money on the back end of that than literally anything else. I think 2024, we could still see, just because it'll only be a year after the acquisition, that I still could see that would happen. But I think that's when the landscape is going to change pretty heavily around that time. If PlayStation negotiates a contract, I'm very curious to see how much they're going to be willing to bend and buckle, because they're like, unfortunately, PlayStation needs at Call of Duty more than Microsoft needs PlayStation, I think. Regardless of, the market share or anything else, I think, Microsoft is really going to be in the driving seat in those discussions. And I'm curious to see how this is going to shake out. But I think it's nice to know that we're at least getting Call of Duty for the next 2 years, which is what we expected. But yeah, I can't get over this tweet. It's so well put together. It's geniusly written, Ryan. But what about you? What do you think? Yeah,
I mean, you could definitely tell with this tweet, like it was poured over by like many, many, many lawyers to kind of make sure that the wording was exactly correct. Because until the acquisition, happens, they can't really say one way or the other as to what's going to happen with it anyways. It's the same thing that happened with, Microsoft acquired Bethesda and they couldn't really be super clear about it. It's not that they don't want to be super clear. I think it's just legally they can't for reasons. They don't want to tank the stock price or anything like that or do anything like that. So I think and we talked about this a little bit when on the Xbox Drive yesterday, but I feel like when Xbox does kind of their round table with Activision, when they fully acquire them, kind of like they did with Bethesda, when they had like that live stream where they had like Todd Howard and Pete Hines and a bunch of other people from Bethesda kind of like do this round table to talk about the future of Bethesda. I imagine they're going to do something very similar with Activision when this happens. So at that point, that's when we'll finally hear about, what's exclusive, what's not going to be exclusive, and kind of what the future of Activision is going to be. We've also been hearing rumblings too, as well, that there's a possibility that Call of Duty moves away from the yearly model as well. So that is also a possibility too, where maybe like the exclusivity like continues, like gets pushed back maybe until 3 games come out because maybe there isn't a Call of Duty game in 2024. Maybe they go further and put out a game the next year. Because I imagine that they maybe do something like what Ubisoft does with Assassin's Creed and goes to like a 2 games every 3 years kind of model. Like maybe do something like that. I think maybe even makes more sense for Call of Duty. So I think that there's a lot of stuff in play. It's still way too early to tell. But I definitely again, a lot of the reads I was seeing from people or people retweeting Phil's statement being like, oh yeah, this confirms that it's staying on PlayStation forever. And I don't know about that. I think this is very, as to your point, Matt, I think it's very carefully worded to it's like, well, actually, probably not. But I wanted to throw this in here so we could at least talk about it a little bit. Ultimately, we kind of gave our predictions last week as far as what we think is happening with Call of Duty. And I don't think either of them has really changed after hearing this news. So there you go. All right. And our last topic before we get to your questions, Lucasfilm Games have announced 3 new Star Wars games are coming from Respawn: Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order 2, a new non-Battlefront first-person shooter that apparently is going to focus on movement tech, kind of like Titanfall is, and a new strategy game made in tandem with former Firaxis developers. No timetables were given for any of these games or titles other than Jedi Fallen Order 2 as a working title, and we don't even know if that's the final title. And not only that, but it doesn't sound like, according to multiple insiders, that Fallen Order 2 is probably not going to come out this year, barring some kind of miracle. So, Matt, what do you think about this news that Respawn getting 3 more Star Wars games, which I think is an interesting move? It doesn't sound like any of the other EA studios are working on Star Wars at this point.
Well, I mean, I think up front, this just shows how unhappy EA and Disney probably are with DICE for the handling of the Battlefront series, and especially with the latest Battlefield tanking as well. I can't imagine they're too pleased over there. But as for Respawn, this is just, it sounds like they're becoming like Star Wars' Insomniac, right? As much as Marvel is putting everything into Insomniac now, it sounds like Star Wars is kind of doing the same thing with Respawn. And Respawn is a fantastic developer. This to me sounds like they're going to be ramping up a lot. Like this sounds like they're going to have a lot of teams going at the same time, which I hope doesn't really take away from the magic that Respawn brings, because I do think their games are quite special. I'm excited for Fallen Order 2. I really, really liked the first one. Whenever it comes, whenever it's ready, I'm ready to play it. A new non-Battlefront first-person shooter makes me excited because we just recently also had the Boba Fett gameplay leaked from what should have been Star Wars 1313, and that it looked cool even if it was unfinished. So while this is going to be obviously in first person, I'm excited for a different experience, and I really do hope it's something along more of the grimy, crappier underworlds of Star Wars, the kind of crime infested stuff, because I think that'd be really cool. And on top of that, a strategy game. If Firaxis, former Firaxis devs are involved, I'm in. This sounds really cool. As long as it's not too much RTS, like a StarCraft or something, then
no, I imagine this is probably more like an XCOM, or if they go in a different direction, maybe it's more like Civilization on PC rather than a real-time strategy game like a StarCraft or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm curious. I'm very curious to see. I don't anticipate outside of Fallen Order 2, which, I would guess would be out by the end of next year. I don't anticipate we're going to see either one of these next 2 games for quite some time, which is a little weird that they had decided to be like, here's all this, information for things you're not going to see for many years. But you know what? It's cool that we're getting them, Ryan. What about you? Are you excited? Are you nervous about Respawn taking on this much? Where are you at?
So first off, I will say that this announcement actually really reminds me of when they first announced that EA was doing Star Wars, because that's actually when we first heard that Respawn was working on a Star Wars game, and that was 3 or 4 years before they even announced Jedi Fallen Order. So it was just it feels like that, where the Firaxis, the strategy based game, for example, is probably 4 or 5 years away at this point. So yeah, I think that there's quite a long roadmap here as far as the first person shooter, besides what you talked about as far as maybe the grimy side. The other thing maybe I'd love to see is maybe a Dark Forces reboot. I think would be pretty cool. Maybe reintroducing Kyle Katarn to the Star Wars canon, because he was one of my favorite characters from the extended universe that they brought in. And I love the Dark Forces games. I've talked about it before on other podcasts as far as how I used to play, Jedi Knight professionally. So I love those games in particular, and I'd love to see maybe those games return in a big way. And I think that's just a Star Wars IP that's just sitting there not being used, that I think could really actually be pretty awesome. So I think this is a good move overall. But what this move basically tells me also is, if Respawn's working on this and they're working on Apex, it also means Titanfall 3 ain't happening for at least another 5 or 10 years at this point. So I think we can kind of this kind of kills any hopes of that, or really just Respawn working on anything else at this point. Like they're not going to probably have like another game, like even a new IP or anything like that wows us. I think they're just all in on Star Wars in the same way that you talked about with Insomniac, where they're kind of all in on Marvel at this point. Even though Insomniac did Ratchet, I think their hands are kind of tied as far as future projects. Like I think it'll be a while before we even see like a new Ratchet or anything else from them besides, Wolverine or Spider-Man at this point. So, and I think Respawn, to your point, is probably kind of locked in the same way. So I'm excited about these games. I also like Jedi Fallen Order, even though it had some problems. I think they can iron some stuff out with the next one and make it a really solid experience. And I can't wait to see what they do next. But let's let some of our friends into the car with us. Matt, it is time for the carpool. So folks at home, if you'd like to be part of the carpool, you can leave us your questions on Twitter. We tweet out a question post every single Wednesday afternoon over on Yubi Caprice on Twitter. Also, you can join the Yubi Caprice Discord. The link's in the show notes. It's free to join. You can leave your questions there. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, just leave a question in the YouTube comments, just like Dan at Dano12 did on Twitter. And he asked the question, if given the task, which PlayStation exclusive would you choose to keep in the past? As in no remakes, no remastered, and no chance of becoming backwards compatible. So, Matt, this is kind of a sad question, but which PlayStation franchise would you want to bury forever at this point?
I really don't know, Ryan. Honestly, like I've gone through like a massive list of PlayStation games. I was trying to think of them. Like I genuinely don't really know what I'd want to bury forever, just because I feel like a lot of the games have an opportunity to bring something to someone. But like if I was kind of hard pressed to kind of leave it be, surprisingly enough, I actually don't want to see Little Big Planet come back. I think that like the new direction that they're going with Sackboy is really cool. I genuinely really enjoyed Sackboy's Big Adventure. And like even with Media Molecule on Dreams now, I feel like that creation suite is just so much more than it ever has been. And like I feel like such a big part of what made Little Big Planet special was the community around it and was the kind of ability to kind of jump in and play other user created stuff. Even though I was never one making it, I enjoyed it for what it was. So I kind of feel like those games had a place in time, and I'm glad that they exist. But I don't really have any need for them to come back, especially with the way the Media Molecule is gone, with the way that Sackboy is right now. As much as it hurts me to say that, that's kind of the answer that I came to, because I couldn't really think of much else, honestly. What about you, Ryan? So
for me, again, this is also a tough question because like there's not many that I'm like, man, this really hurts the brand for Sony to release them. So this one's more out of spite, because I mean, they tried to kind of bring this franchise back before in the PlayStation 4 era when they did like kind of an HD remaster of this, and it was real bad. So just leave Parappa the Rapper dead. We don't need Parappa the Rapper to come back. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Parappa is a cool character and he would be awesome in something, like a PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale 2, but he doesn't need his own game again. So leave Parappa in the past. This also hopefully means that the sequel to Unjammer Lammy is just around the corner, Matt, at this point. So because that was a way superior game to Parappa the Rapper. So there you go. But again, honestly, I don't want to see any of them come back, be buried forever. Just like Parappa the Rapper, I wouldn't be sad if they brought back another one. But next up, Todd Oxtra at Toxtra asks, will Sony take the Xbox approach of small improvements this generation to improve goodwill, like backwards compatibility, until they can shore up new acquisitions, or will they continue their current strategy and be largely silent outside of pressures? So as far as your question, Todd, I actually don't think that they really shift strategy at this point. I think that Jim Ryan's kind of found what he considers to be the winning strategy for Sony, as far as, keeping the status quo, kind of making these like big tentpole event games that everyone kind of like is talking about whenever they're released. And that's kind of their thing, I think. And then making, smaller like exclusivity deals for third-party games. I think that's just more their jam. And I don't really see them really trying to, improve goodwill as far as doing other stuff. Obviously, backwards compatibility, we talked about it before when we talked about Spartacus, but obviously I think that's coming in that form, but I'm not expecting it outside of, your subscription to Spartacus. Like they're not going to have like pop your PS1 disc into your PlayStation 5 and you'll be able to play, Valkyrie Profile or something like that. Like, I don't think they're going to do something like that. But Matt, what do you think about this question?
I think you're spot on, my friend. I don't see them really changing strategy. It's working for them right now. They continue to, sell PS5s as fast as they can make them. Their games continue to sell incredibly well. Like, while I do think they'll maybe change things a little bit with how much they offer on PC and maybe making those games a little bit more readily available, while also Spartacus being their kind of answer to Game Pass, I really do think that, like, for them to start really changing their strategy would mean that they are losing. If they are, if they're losing market share, if they're losing the kind of, gamer mind frame of, PlayStation's awesome, PS5 is great, they have all these incredible games, I don't see them significantly changing until that starts to happen. And I think right now it's still working for them, and the little incremental stuff that they'll do will be, smaller acquisitions, smaller studios, stuff like, your Blue Points. So I don't really see them changing because it's working. And like you said, Jim Ryan is very much like, old game is old, and this strategy is still going strong for them. And I don't see them changing because of it, because of anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, TPR on Discord asks, let's say Sony does PlayStation All-Stars, the sequel, like Matt kind of, was hoping for. Is there a lesser known Sony character that you'd like to see added? Someone's besides your Aloys, Jin Sakai's, Bloodborne Hunters, Joel's, Ellie's, and Abby's? If so, who? So first off, even though it's not an unknown character, I would love to see Dart from Legend of Dragoon back. He was supposed to be in the last PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, and he got cut off because they stopped developing for the game. Like, they had actually developed his character out and everything. He was supposed to be in it and just wasn't. So that's a character I would love to see. But like, as far as lesser known characters, I would love to see Ava, the main character from Parasite Eve. I think she would be a really cool character. Like, she would almost take the place of like one of the Resident Evil characters, for example, in like Marvel vs. Capcom or something like that, where she have an assortment of guns and gadgets and stuff like that. I think like she would be a cool character to use. And then as far as other characters, I don't know. I think that's a tough question. Maybe even like the Sound Shapes blob or something like that, or like an army of Patapons maybe as like a character. But Matt, what do you think about this question?
So I made a list, Ryan. Well, I would love to see some, Xbox characters cross over like Crash and Spyro. For me, I would really love to see, Tomba. I actually think would be a cool inclusion from like all the way back in the PS1 days. Give me Echo. Give me the dolphin. Ooh. I think that would be hilarious. And then some of my other big gets, I would like Jackie Chan from Jackie Chan Adventures. Because, the martial arts and stuff, that would be great. I want the eye toy, just the eye toy.
Yes. But it doesn't have any arms. How does it fight?
Don't worry about it. It has a cable. It can whip and stuff. Believe me, it can like take pictures and like stun enemies. Believe me, I've thought about it. But my biggest get, the one that I would really, really want, is Hassan from Blue Box, because everybody knows he's an AI created character who doesn't actually exist, and I think he'd be perfect for All Stars Battle Royale too. So that would be those would be my picks. My God. You might as well have just said you want the Eye of Judgment in this game at this point. Or like when you said Jackie Chan from Jackie Chan Adventures, I'm imagining, well, okay, at that point, that means we can just argue for Yugi from Yu-Gi-Oh! Because, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories was on PlayStation 1 or something like that. Yeah, know? But I only want the Millennium Eye, not the rest of it.
Okay, great. I'm so glad we had this topic. And then the last question once again comes to us from the most famous of all Seamus's famous, Seamus, who asks, favorite thing you saw from the Horizon Forbidden West previews? I'm going to pretty much throw this one to Matt because honestly, I didn't read any of them. I'm on personal media blackout from this game. I didn't watch any of the newest trailers. I didn't read any of the previews because the game's right around the corner and I don't want to know anything. But Matt, is there anything that caught your eye? Did you see any of the previews? What do you think?
I read, I think it was IGN's, because I think that was the first one that kind of popped, but I kind of quickly skimmed through it. And I, similarly to you, I did not look at any of the footage. I did not look at any of the screenshots because again, like the game's imminent. I don't need to see anymore. But from the preview, they seem to be really genuinely happy with how Aloy feels, which is, I think, the biggest thing for me kind of going into Forbidden West, with how agile she's supposed to feel and, the maneuverability and being able to just, I'm very happy to hear that you can climb much more than you can in the original game. Mm-hmm. So it's that stuff, it's the maneuverability and it's the kind of moving around the map that makes me excited, and by all accounts they seem to have nailed it. So that's what I'm excited for. But I had, like, again, similar to you, Ryan, I looked into nothing more than that because the game's a couple weeks away. I'm already sold. I don't need more from it. Yeah, exactly. It'd be different if we'd be kind of on the fence about this game still, but like, yeah, there's nothing I need to know that it's going to convince me that this game is, not worth picking up day one. I've already got my, regalia edition of the game pre-ordered. So I'm excited to get that and put that elephant together. Maybe it'll be in the back here next to my Warrior of Light statue or my Final Fantasy 14 photo frame here. Anyways, we got to go. But before we go, Matt, plugs go. Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at burnout_Matt, or you can find us over at youtube.com/burnoutbrighter, where we do a bunch of whole cool video game and mental health stuff. We have our mental health series. The second episode is up. And very quickly, I also want to plug that on Tuesday at 8:30 p.m., I will be live over on our friends over at Xbox A on youtube.com/Xbox A, because we're having the console war to end all console wars. It'll be myself and Mr. K-Step from the Trophy Room going up against Matt and Court from Xbox A, talking about which one really is better. But it doesn't really matter. We love all platforms.
But we already know what's better. It's PlayStation. Duh.
Oh, obviously.
PlayStation Drive, right?
Yeah. And what's it called? The Xbox A crew will be giving out a 12-month pass to Game Pass Ultimate. So come hang out, come support as we argue and yell at each other like a bunch of big old man babies. But what about you, Ryan?
Well, that's for me. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capri's, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Matt Swinski, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 36 of the PlayStation Drive, and we're out. The PlayStation Drive is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri, and I want to say thank you to each and every one of our patrons from the bottom of my heart from your support across all of our content. And let's start by thanking our premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our platinum producers, Robbie Ballaby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Fulia Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support.